On a small colony far away from the center of the galaxy, life was already difficult. The people there were not soldiers. They were farmers, workers, teachers, and families who had come to the colony for a better life. They believed they had found peace on their new world, far from the conflicts of larger civilizations. But peace did not last. One day their skies darkened as ships belonging to a ruthless, warlike species appeared. These were not visitors. They were predators who came to take, to destroy, and to rule. The colony's defenses were weak, almost symbolic. A few local patrol ships tried to resist, but they were quickly destroyed. Within hours, the enemy had broken through the first line of defense, and the colony realized they were almost helpless. Fear spread through the streets. Families gathered in shelters, unsure if they would survive the night. The leaders of the colony gathered together, speaking in hurried voices. They had one choice left: to send an SOS signal into space. The message was simple: "We are under attack. We cannot hold. Please help us." But as they prepared the message, doubt filled their hearts. Who would hear it? Who would care? The galaxy was wide, and their colony was small and unimportant. Larger empires had ignored smaller voices before. But with no other option, they pressed the signal into the void. It was a desperate cry, like a drowning sailor throwing a bottle into the sea, hoping someone somewhere might find it. The signal traveled far, moving silently across star systems. It passed dead worlds, silent stations, and empty space. The colonists could only wait. Every hour felt longer than the last. Their defenses collapsed piece by piece. The enemy grew bolder, landing raiding parties on the surface, taking supplies and destroying homes. Every day more lives were lost. The colony waited for an answer, but nothing came. Their hope grew weaker, and some began to believe the signal had simply vanished, swallowed by the endless dark. Still, the transmission repeated again and again, reaching farther than the colonists could ever imagine. And then, against all expectations, the signal reached a world many had forgotten: Earth. Humanity had been silent for decades. Once, their name was spoken with fear and caution across the stars. Other species called them Deathworlders, born from a planet so harsh that survival itself was a daily war. Humanity had fought among themselves for centuries, and in the end they turned inward, cutting ties with the rest of the galaxy. No one had heard from them in years. Many believed they had withdrawn forever. Others believed they were too dangerous to be trusted, better left alone. But when the SOS reached Earth, everything changed. Deep inside humanity's communication networks, the signal appeared. It was faint, filled with static, but the message was clear. A colony was under attack, and they were dying. At first, there was silence. The transmission was studied by scientists, then passed to leaders, then finally to the old fleet commanders who remembered what it meant to fight. Humanity had grown quiet, but quiet did not mean weak. Beneath the surface of their silence, they had not forgotten who they were. They had not forgotten how to fight, how to protect, and how to answer a cry for help. Something deep in their nature stirred when they heard the message. It was not just a call for help, it was a challenge. A reminder of the instinct that had carried them through wars, disasters, and their own violent history. On Earth, people remembered that they came from a world where storms, predators, and hunger had shaped them. Their ancestors had survived the impossible, and they carried that same blood. To hear a cry for help and do nothing was against everything they were. Across the command halls, decisions were made. The fleets that had rested for decades powered up. Engines rumbled to life, weapons were tested, and soldiers prepared. A fire that had been quiet for too long now burned bright again. Humanity would not stay silent any longer. For the colonists, still trapped under siege, they could not know what was happening. They only saw the enemy getting closer every day. But out in the stars, Earth's fleets were already moving. Humanity's response was not gentle words or promises. Their response was steel, fire, and warships. The SOS had awakened something powerful, something the galaxy had almost forgotten. Humanity was coming, and when they came, they would come with the fury of a species that had always fought to survive. On Earth, the signal did not go unnoticed. It appeared first in the deep space listening stations, where tired operators scanned thousands of transmissions each day. At first, it seemed like nothing more than noise. But as the signal was cleaned and decoded, the words became clear. A colony was under attack, begging for help. The message was rushed to military intelligence, and soon the highest levels of command were aware of it. A meeting was called, and in secure chambers the leaders of Earth gathered to decide what should be done. The room was filled with tension. Some argued that humanity should ignore the signal. They said the colony was not human, not their responsibility. Others reminded the Council of Earth's long history of war and conflict. Humanity had once nearly destroyed itself with weapons of its own making. Whole cities had been burned and oceans had been poisoned during their darkest times. They had fought countless wars, leaving scars that had not fully healed even now. Did they really want to carry their violence beyond Earth again? For a moment, hesitation filled the air. But outside the chambers, far above the surface of Earth, the fleets already knew the answer. Orbiting the planet were massive ships, silent but never forgotten. These fleets had been built in a time when humanity expected threats to come from the stars. For decades they had rested, their engines cold, their weapons sleeping. Yet the crews who maintained them had never stopped training. For them, hesitation was unthinkable. They lived with the knowledge of Earth's harsh truth. Their home was a death world, and only strength had kept their species alive. On Earth, life had always been a struggle. Humanity's ancestors fought against hunger, storms, predators, and even each other. They survived ice ages, plagues, and disasters that would have ended weaker species. Every generation was forged in difficulty, learning that survival was never given. It was taken, earned, and defended. That history lived in every human soldier, every engineer, every commander who now looked at the desperate signal from the colony. To ignore a call for help was not just cowardice. It was against the very instinct that defined them. Back in the council chambers, the debate grew louder. Some feared what would happen if humanity revealed itself again to the galaxy. They had been silent for decades, hidden from interstellar affairs. Many alien civilizations had even begun to believe Earth no longer cared about the wider galaxy. To appear now with fleets of warships would remind everyone of what humanity truly was: dangerous, unrelenting, and unafraid of war. But in the end, the decision could not be delayed. The message from the colony was more than a cry for help. It was a test of who humanity still was. The order was given. The fleets would awaken. Across Earth's orbit, alarms rang through stations. Lights flashed inside command centers as codes were entered and systems came online. Deep inside the starships, reactors that had been silent for years roared with new energy. The floor shook as power surged through massive engines. Weapons locked into place, glowing as they primed for battle. In the docking bays, crews assembled. Men and women who had trained their entire lives for a war that never came now stood ready. For years they had wondered if they would ever be called upon, if their purpose was simply to maintain a force that would never be used. Now their moment had arrived. They moved with precision, boarding the warships, checking systems, preparing themselves for what lay ahead. Their expressions were not of fear, but of determination. They knew that when humanity answered, it would never be with half measures. The colony that had sent the signal did not yet know, but the galaxy was about to change. For decades, many species had spoken of humans only in whispers. Some called them monsters from a cursed world. Others called them survivors, a people who could not be broken. And some hoped they had vanished into silence forever. But now, with the fleets awakening, the galaxy would be reminded of what humans were. They were not diplomats who would arrive with promises. They were not merchants who would arrive with deals. They were warriors from a death world. And when they came, they brought the full weight of their history with them. The sight of the awakening fleets was unforgettable. One by one, massive starships drifted from their orbits, their hulls shining in the darkness of space. Entire squadrons formed into lines, moving like parts of a single vast machine. The hum of engines grew into a roar as they aligned for departure. Inside each ship, soldiers strapped into their stations, waiting for the command to jump into the stars. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. They knew the galaxy would learn again what it meant when humans answered a cry for help. For the people of Earth, this was more than a mission. It was a statement. They were no longer silent, no longer hidden. Their silence had been mistaken for weakness. But now they would remind the galaxy that they were forged by a world that gave no mercy. Their response to suffering was not speeches. It was action. Their way of protecting was inseparable from their way of waging war. As the final countdown began, Earth's night skies lit up with streaks of light as the fleets departed. The warships disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind only silence. On Earth, the people watched and waited. knowing their fleets had gone not only to save a colony but also to declare humanity's return to the stars. The galaxy would not be the same. The SOS had been answered, and the answer was warships, fire, and the unbreakable will of Deathworlders. The alien attackers had grown confident. From the moment they arrived at the colony, everything had gone as they planned. The colony's defenses had been too weak, its ships too few, and its soldiers untrained compared to the professional war bands of the invaders. The enemy laughed at how easily the defense lines had crumbled. They mocked the colonists as they took supplies and burned settlements, celebrating an easy victory that seemed guaranteed. To them, this was nothing more than another conquest, another world added to their list of spoils. They never once considered that resistance might come from somewhere else. The colonists had been pushed to their limits. Many had lost family members, homes, and hope. The streets were filled with fear and smoke while the enemy celebrated loudly, believing no one would dare to challenge their power. The colonists could not fight back anymore. They waited for the end, believing their SOS signal had vanished into the void. But just as the darkness of despair began to swallow them, the skies above their world changed forever. From the silent edges of space, black shapes appeared. At first, the invaders thought it was nothing, asteroids or debris drifting close. But then the shadows grew larger, sharper, and more organized. Entire fleets emerged, their hulls dark and imposing, carrying the mark of a species the galaxy had whispered about for centuries. Earth's warships had arrived. They came without warning, their sudden appearance ripping through the fabric of hyperspace. In an instant, the predators who had mocked the weak realized they were no longer the hunters. They were about to become prey. The first volley came without hesitation. The sky split open with fire as beams of energy and storms of missiles fell upon the invaders' ships. The night above the colony was lit brighter than day, glowing with explosions that shook the ground below. The colonists, who had hidden in fear for so long, looked up in shock. For the first time, they saw their enemies' ships burning, shattering and falling from the sky. It was like witnessing the wrath of gods. The human fleets did not fight with hesitation. Their tactics were not refined to look elegant or honorable. They were brutal, efficient, and merciless. Every move had been sharpened by centuries of surviving wars on their own death world. They had learned to strike fast, to strike hard, and to never give their enemy a chance to recover, where other species might test the waters, negotiate, or attempt to scare their opponents into retreat. Humanity unleashed destruction with perfect precision. The alien attackers, caught off guard, scrambled to respond. They tried to regroup their ships, tried to form defensive lines, but the humans were already inside their ranks. Strike formations cut through them like blades, breaking their fleets apart into isolated fragments. Each counterattack was carefully planned, every shot aimed to cripple, to disable, or to annihilate. The humans did not waste fire. They did not hesitate. Every second of the battle showed the difference between a species born in comfort and a species born in struggle. The invaders had mocked the colonists for their weakness, but now they were the ones running in fear. Their commanders screamed orders, but panic had already spread. They had expected a simple victory, a quick raid to claim resources. Instead, they faced the fury of Deathworlders, humans who had fought endless wars even against themselves, humans who understood destruction better than any other. Within minutes, the battle had turned. Ships that had once flown proudly now burned, scattering debris across the sky. For the colonists watching from below, it was both terrifying and miraculous. They had prayed for rescue, but they had never imagined rescue would come like this. The black silhouettes of Earth's warships filled them with awe and fear at the same time. These were not gentle saviors arriving with open arms. These were warriors from a world so dangerous that survival itself was war. Their arrival meant salvation, but it also showed the colonists a power far greater and far harsher than anything they had ever seen. On the battlefield, the humans did not offer negotiations. There were no demands for surrender, no talks, no mercy extended to those who had brought suffering to the colony. The invaders had chosen to attack the weak, and for that, they were given no chance to escape. Humanity did not play games with predators. They destroyed them completely. One by one, enemy ships fell from the sky until the once proud fleet was nothing more than ruins, scattered and burning against the stars. The colonists would never forget the sight. The ground shook as wreckage crashed down from orbit. Fire streaked across the horizon as the last of the invaders were torn apart. The skies that had once carried nothing but fear now carried the image of unstoppable force. In that moment, the survivors understood why the galaxy both feared and respected humanity. The Deathworlders had answered their call, and the price of that answer was written in fire and steel. When the battle ended, silence fell. The invaders were gone, annihilated so completely that not a single one remained to carry the story back. Only the colonists and the humans had witnessed it. For the survivors, it was a day that would mark their history forever. They had been saved from destruction, but the way they were saved showed them a truth that would echo in their memories. When humans fought, they fought to end the threat entirely. There was no half measure, no hesitation. Humanity did not negotiate with those who preyed on the weak. They destroyed them so thoroughly that the danger could never rise again. For the alien attackers, their arrogance had cost them everything. They believed they had found another helpless victim, but instead, they had called down the fury of Earth. And for the galaxy, though it had not yet heard, this battle would soon become legend. Humanity had returned to the stars, and they had returned in the only way they knew, by fighting with the full power of a species born to survive the impossible. When the final enemy ship was destroyed, the battlefield became strangely quiet. The skies that had been filled with fire, smoke, and falling wreckage were now calm again, as if the storm of war had suddenly passed. The colonists slowly stepped out from the shelters where they had been hiding. Their ears still rang from the explosions and their eyes still carried fear, but now there was also a different feeling: relief. They were alive. The invaders who had promised to enslave them were gone, wiped out so completely that not even their wreckage gave hope of return. Yet as they looked to the human warships above, a new uncertainty grew inside them. What would these Deathworlders want in return for saving them? Many of the colonists expected demands. Stories across the galaxy spoke of powerful empires that would arrive as rescuers, but then force their protection at a terrible cost. Some whispered that humanity, with its reputation for violence, might claim the colony as their own. Others feared the humans would strip their resources, take their people as soldiers, or make them pay endless tribute. The colonists had been saved from one enemy, but what if another, even stronger one had just taken its place? But what happened next surprised everyone. Instead of declaring ownership, Earth's fleet sent down supply drops. Massive shuttles landed carefully on the colony's broken surface, carrying food, clean water, medicine, and materials for repair. Human engineers stepped out of their ships and began helping to rebuild defenses that had been destroyed. Soldiers helped move rubble, treating the wounded with medical kits far more advanced than anything the colonists had ever seen. What the colony had expected was chains. What they received was aid. Yet this aid was not soft or gentle. Humanity's mercy carried the same hard edge as their war. When they handed out food, they also reminded the colonists that hunger would come again if they did not learn to grow stronger. When they gave medicine, they warned that sickness would return if they did not prepare for it. When they repaired defenses, they taught the colonists how to maintain and fight with them. The humans did not simply save the weak. They demanded that the weak stop being weak. To some colonists, this was harsh. They wanted comfort, reassurance, and safety. But the humans gave something different. They gave survival, the kind that came with pain, discipline, and effort. Human soldiers began training groups of colonists in simple combat drills. They showed them how to hold weapons, how to watch the skies, how to set traps and organize patrols. They did not speak gently, nor did they allow excuses. If a colonist complained they were too tired, the humans told them survival did not wait for rest. If someone said they were too afraid to fight, the humans replied that fear would not stop an invader's blade. Slowly, the colonists began to understand. Humanity was not here to rule them or to comfort them. They were here to make sure that the next time an enemy came, the colony would not fall so easily. For the children, this was both terrifying and inspiring. They watched the human soldiers train with a precision and toughness that seemed almost unnatural. They saw men and women who could run for hours, fight without hesitation, and still carry heavy supplies back to the colony afterward. At first, the children feared them, calling them storms in human form. But later they began to imitate them, practicing the movements they saw, dreaming that one day they could be that strong. To the older colonists, humanity was both savior and storm. They had saved them from destruction, But they also brought a reminder of what real survival demanded. The humans did not cry with them or share in their grief. They respected their losses, but they pushed them forward instead of letting them drown in sorrow. Many colonists found this difficult to accept, but others realized it was the greatest gift the humans could give. To survive in a galaxy full of predators, one could not remain weak. Strength was not optional. It was the price of continued existence. The weeks passed and the colony began to change. Buildings rose again, but now they were built with stronger foundations, guided by human engineering. Defense towers were repaired and reinforced with technology Earth had shared. Patrol routes were established, and colonists began to take turns guarding their homes, carrying weapons with hands that once only carried tools. Fear was still present, but it was no longer paralyzing. It had transformed into determination. They were no longer waiting helplessly for someone to save them. They were preparing themselves to stand and fight if the need came again. The humans remained for a while, overseeing the rebuilding, but they never once acted like conquerors. They slept in their ships, not in the colonists' homes. They accepted food only when offered freely. And when they spoke, their words carried lessons, not commands. To the colonists, this was strange. They had always believed saviors would either be gentle or tyrannical. Humanity was neither. They were something else entirely. They were both protector and warning, carrying the storm with them wherever they went. When it was time to leave, the colonists gathered to watch the great warships rise into the skies once more. The black silhouettes vanished back into the stars, leaving behind rebuilt defenses, stocked supplies, and a people forever changed. The colonists felt gratitude, but also unease. They had been saved, yes, but they had also been shown a truth they could never forget. Mercy was not always soft. Sometimes mercy came in steel, fire, and hard lessons. In the years to come, the colony would tell the story again and again. They would speak of how humanity arrived when no one else did, how they fought with terrifying strength, and how they stayed not to rule, but to teach. The lesson was clear. To survive, one must be strong, one must endure, and one must be willing to fight when the storm comes. Humanity had given them more than life. They had given them a glimpse of what true survival cost. For the colonists, humanity would always be remembered as both savior and storm. They were the protectors who saved them from destruction, and at the same time the living warning of what it truly meant to endure in a cruel and unforgiving galaxy. Their presence left behind more than rebuilt walls and new weapons. It left behind a spirit that would never again bow so easily to fear. Word of the battle did not stay hidden for long. Even though the colony was small and distant, messages and stories traveled faster than ships. Traders, scouts, and travelers who passed by carried the tale to nearby systems. Soon it spread across entire sectors of the galaxy. Everywhere the story was told, it sounded almost like a legend. A colony had been on the edge of destruction. Invaders had come, certain of victory. And then from the darkness, Earth's fleets had arrived. The humans had destroyed the attackers with a speed and fury no one expected. In a matter of hours, the invaders who had seemed unstoppable were nothing but wreckage drifting in orbit. Different species reacted in different ways. Some were filled with admiration. They praised humanity as heroes, a people who did not turn their backs when a desperate cry for help was heard. These races had seen too many times how stronger empires ignored the weak, refusing to risk their fleets for colonies that had little value. But humanity had done the opposite. They had crossed the stars to save lives, and in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy of what true courage looked like. For those who believed in honor and justice, the name of Earth began to shine like a beacon of hope. But not everyone celebrated. In many council chambers and war rooms, whispers of fear began to spread. The scale of humanity's power was terrifying. They had answered a call for help, yes, but the way they had answered was impossible to ignore. No negotiations, no warnings, just fleets of steel and fire that had obliterated the enemy without mercy. To some species, this was not the mark of heroes, but of monsters. If humans could do this to protect a single colony, what would they do if they felt truly threatened? What if their wrath was turned against a larger empire? What if they decided to expand their reach? The galaxy had long called them Deathworlders, beings shaped by a planet so dangerous that their entire culture was built on survival through struggle. Now that reputation was no longer rumor, it was fact proven on the battlefield. For the colony itself, the memory of that day would never fade. The survivors told their story with both gratitude and fear. They spoke of the black silhouettes, of Earth's warships, how they had arrived like shadows and then lit the skies with fire. They remembered the sound of enemy ships exploding, the ground trembling with falling wreckage, and the sight of human soldiers marching through their streets not as conquerors, but as saviors. They also remembered the way those same humans had looked at them with eyes hardened by struggle, teaching them that survival was not given, it was earned. To the colonists, humanity was unforgettable, both a shield that had saved them and a storm that had shown them the price of protection. As the story spread wider, the meaning of sending a signal to Earth began to change. Once, many had thought humans were silent, isolated, perhaps even unwilling to interfere with galactic affairs. But now everyone knew the truth. If you sent a signal to Earth, they would come, but they would not come with gentle words or half-hearted efforts. They would arrive with their fleets, with their weapons, with their merciless efficiency. They would save you, but they would also leave behind the reminder that survival required strength. This new reputation carried both hope and dread. To weaker colonies, the phrase, "send a signal to Earth," became a promise of survival. If invaders came, if enemies threatened, they knew humanity would not abandon them. Where other empires debated, delayed, or bargained, Earth acted, and their action was always decisive. For those who were desperate, it meant safety. It meant they would live another day. But to the powerful empires, to those who had once believed, they controlled the balance of the galaxy. The phrase was terrifying. It meant that humanity could no longer be ignored. It meant that their silence had ended, and their fleets could appear anywhere, at any time, answering the cries of the weak with unstoppable force. Meetings were held across star systems. Leaders debated how to deal with this new reality. Should they ally with Earth, hoping to be seen as friends rather than threats? Or should they prepare defenses, fearing the day humanity might not come as saviors, but as enemies? The galaxy, which once thought it had grown used to peace in some regions, now lived with the knowledge that the Deathworlders had awakened. Humanity had returned, and they would always answer a call for help. But their answer was not simple kindness. It was power, fire, and a reminder that survival was not soft. In the years to follow, the colony that had been saved told its story again and again. Travelers who stopped there listened to survivors describe how the humans fought. Children grew up hearing how black warships had appeared like shadows before destroying the enemy with a precision that no other fleet had ever shown. Priests, teachers, and leaders used the story as a lesson. If humanity could protect them, then they themselves must also learn to be strong. Even generations later, the day the humans came was marked as the day the colony was reborn, not only as survivors, but as fighters who carried a little of Earth's spirit in their hearts. For the galaxy as a whole, the return of humanity changed everything. No longer could their name be spoken only in myths or warnings passed between smugglers and traders. Now it was a fact written in blood and fire. Humanity had proven that they were not gone. They had proven that they still carried the instincts of their death world, instincts that made them fierce protectors and terrifying enemies at the same time. To some, this was hope, because it meant that in the darkest times when all seemed lost, one could still call upon Earth. But to others, it was dread, because once the humans were awake, there was no way to make them sleep again. From that day forward, the galaxy lived with a new understanding. The phrase, "send a signal to Earth," was no longer a desperate wish whispered in hopeless moments. It was a choice that carried weight. It meant you would be saved, yes, but it also meant the storm would come. And storms do not pass gently. They destroy what stands against them. Humanity had awakened, and every race knew that from now on, whenever a cry for help went out into the void, there was one species that would always answer. And when they answered, the galaxy would feel it.